Riley Drake had always considered himself a background character in the grand scheme of things. Growing up on Earth, he had never been able to rise above the chaos of his own troubled life. He wasn't a fighter, a scientist, or a diplomat. He was just another face in the crowd. But here he was, on a research vessel orbiting a desolate planet, surrounded by beings who were much more important than he could ever hope to be. The Starship had been discovered weeks ago, its colossal frame half buried in the sands of the planet. From the moment the alien researchers arrived, their fascination was evident. The ship, though ancient and clearly of non-human origin, was unlike anything they had ever encountered. Its surface was etched with alien symbols, its design more advanced than any technology currently known to the Intergalactic Alliance. And yet, no one could activate it. No matter how many commands were issued, no matter how many buttons were pressed, the Starship refused to respond. The research vessel was bustling with activity as the various alien factions, ZYNTH, Iruzi, and Trollin, scrambled to make sense of the situation. The ZYNTH, a technologically advanced but militaristic species, believed the ship was a weapon. The Iruzi, a peaceful race known for their diplomacy, hoped it could be a tool for intergalactic unity. The Trollin, fiercely independent and secretive, were more concerned about keeping the ship out of the hands of others. Tensions ran high as every faction wanted control of the ship, fearing the power it might possess. Riley, for his part, was assigned to menial tasks. His job on the research vessel was simple: keep things clean, maintain the ship's various systems, and stay out of the way of the important work. He didn't have a background in engineering, piloting, or diplomacy. He wasn't even supposed to be here. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. On the day of the failed experiment, Riley found himself working in the lower decks of the vessel, performing routine maintenance. He was a janitor, not a scientist, but somehow he had ended up near the central command area when the experiment was underway. He had no idea what the researchers were doing, something with energy fields and interface protocols, but it didn't matter. The experiment went wrong. A sudden surge of power pulsed through the ship. The lights flickered, and an eerie hum filled the air. Riley was thrown backward against the wall as the ship's systems momentarily lost power. He tried to scramble to his feet, but his body felt heavy, as if gravity itself had momentarily shifted. His head was spinning, and he could barely make sense of the disarray around him. It wasn't until he saw the alien researchers, panicked, disoriented, that he realized something had gone wrong. Then, as quickly as the power surge had hit, the ship went silent. The hum stopped. The lights stabilized. But something had changed. Riley felt it before he could understand what was happening. The air around him was different, charged, alive. His senses were heightened, and he could feel something calling to him. He tried to shake it off, blaming his dizzy state on the fall, but the sensation only grew stronger. The researchers, still recovering from the disruption, turned their attention to the ship's central command panel. Something was happening. The ship was powering up. But this time, it wasn't responding to any alien input. The screens flickered and flashed, displaying symbols no one could interpret. Then, a single message appeared in bold, crimson letters across the main display. Pilot identified. Everyone froze. Riley's heart pounded in his chest. He hadn't even touched the controls, hadn't done anything except stumble into the room. But somehow, the ship had recognized him. As the researchers scrambled to make sense of the situation, Riley was approached by a tense-faced alien scientist, the leader of the mission. "Human," the scientist said, his voice barely containing his shock. "What did you do?" Riley stammered, unable to comprehend what was happening. I didn't do anything. I fell." "Your presence triggered the ship," the scientist said, his eyes narrowing. "It's responding to you. We don't know why, but it has chosen you." "Chosen me?" Riley asked incredulously. "What do you mean, chosen me?" Before the scientist could answer, another voice cut in. It was a Trollin officer, his tone sharp. "We can't allow this. Humans cannot be trusted with such power. You must leave." "Enough," the ZYNTH leader interjected, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "This is a rare opportunity. If the ship has recognized the human, we must explore this connection. The room erupted into chaos as the alien factions bickered, each vying for control of the situation. Riley, feeling more like a pawn than ever, tried to retreat into the background. But the words "pilot identified" echoed in his mind. What did that even mean? Why would the ship choose him, of all people? In the days that followed, Riley was forced into an uncomfortable position. The ship had responded to him, and now he was caught in the middle of an intergalactic political conflict. The alien researchers, eager to understand why the ship had recognized a human, insisted that Riley participate in the ongoing study. Though he was reluctant, he couldn't say no. The tension between the factions was palpable, and every time he tried to slip away, someone would find him and pull him back into the fold. But Riley didn't belong here. He wasn't a scientist or a pilot. He wasn't even trained in anything that could help. He was a janitor, a man with a troubled past who had never amounted to much. And yet, now he was thrust into the center of something that could change the course of galactic history. The ship, despite its terrifying power, refused to do anything unless Riley was involved. Every attempt by the alien factions to override the system failed. The ship would not launch, would not activate, unless Riley took his place at the controls. As the days turned into weeks, Riley became increasingly isolated. The aliens, though polite, viewed him with distrust. They couldn't understand why the ship would respond to a human. Many of them thought it was a fluke, a random anomaly. But others, especially the ZYNTH, saw the ship's power as something to be controlled, something to be harnessed. It was during one of these tense moments that Riley was called into the ship's central chamber. A sleek, metallic door slid open, revealing a vast, starry expanse beyond. The ship, once dormant, now hummed with an energy that seemed to vibrate through the very air. The AI, an intangible presence he could feel but never see, spoke to him directly. "Pilot," the voice was calm, devoid of emotion, yet somehow familiar. "Your presence is required." Riley hesitated, his hand hovering over the control panel. The pressure to act weighed heavily on him. What was he supposed to do? He wasn't qualified for this. He didn't understand the technology. Yet, he couldn't deny the connection he felt to the ship. It was as if the ship itself had called to him, as if it was waiting for him to make a choice. "You must decide," the AI continued. "The ship has no will of its own. It is waiting for you." The room grew cold, and Riley could feel the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders. The stars outside seemed to grow distant, as if mocking him. The ship had chosen him. But why? What did it want? Was he ready for this?
With a deep breath, Riley placed his hands on the controls. The ship responded instantly, its systems coming to life, as if it had been waiting for this moment. A soft hum filled the chamber, and the once silent ship began to stir. Riley's pulse quickened. He didn't know what to expect, but he was in control now. For the first time in his life, Riley felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. And yet doubts lingered in the back of his mind. What had he just unleashed? Riley sat in the pilot's seat, feeling a mixture of awe and dread. The starship hummed around him, its systems now fully powered and responsive to his touch. The ship, an ancient and alien construct, seemed to pulse with an energy that was foreign to him, yet at the same time, he felt an inexplicable connection, as if it had chosen him for a purpose that was far beyond anything he could comprehend. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the control panel, the ship's intricate systems slowly unfolding before him like a puzzle. "Pilot," the AI's voice spoke again, calm and insistent. "You must initiate the ship's sequence to begin the first flight." Riley's throat went dry. He had no idea what he was doing. His experience with space travel was limited to cleaning the crew's quarters and watching the more competent officers do their jobs from the sidelines. But the ship's AI, which had become his only guide, was persistent. It didn't ask for permission. It simply expected him to comply. With a deep breath, Riley hesitated for a moment before pressing a button on the console. A low hum resonated through the ship as it slowly powered up, its engines beginning to rumble in response to his command. The walls of the cockpit illuminated, displaying complex data streams and holographic images that made his head spin. The sheer scale of the technology was overwhelming, far beyond anything he had ever seen. And yet, Riley found himself compelled to move forward, his instincts guiding him through the motions, even though his mind was racing with doubt. The ship's AI continued to speak, its tone more urgent now. The Starship was designed for a pilot of your species, but your training is insufficient. I will provide the necessary data to ensure your success. Riley wasn't sure what to make of that. Was this a compliment, or a warning? His mind whirred as the AI began to feed him information. Streams of data about the ship's capabilities, its history, and its purpose flooded his senses. Each piece of the puzzle fell into place, but the more he learned, the more disturbing it became. The ship was no ordinary vessel. It was a weapon, a tool of unimaginable destruction created by an ancient race that had long since vanished from the galaxy. The data revealed something that Riley had not been prepared for. The ship was designed with a single purpose: total annihilation. Its creators had seen the potential for human dominance, but with that potential came a dark prophecy. The ship's true power could only be unlocked by a human pilot, and once activated, it would be capable of wiping out entire civilizations. The ship had been abandoned, forgotten by the universe, but it had been waiting for a time when its true potential would be realized. As the information settled into his mind, Riley felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had known that the ship was powerful, but he hadn't realized the magnitude of what he was dealing with. This was no ordinary starship. It was a weapon, and it was his responsibility to control it. But what if he wasn't capable of doing so? For the first time, Riley questioned the decision he had made. The weight of the responsibility was crushing. He wasn't trained for this. He had no special skills, no military background, nothing that would suggest he could be trusted with the power of an ancient war machine. But here he was, the only one capable of piloting it. And the alien factions, still divided over the ship's true nature, were watching him closely, waiting for him to either fail or prove that humanity was capable of handling such power. As Riley grappled with his doubts, the AI continued to communicate with him. Its voice was calm, but there was an edge to it now, as if it knew what he was thinking. Your hesitation is natural, the AI said, almost as if it could read his thoughts. But you must understand, the ship will only respond to you. It will not listen to any other species. Only you can unlock its potential. Riley clenched his fists around the control panel. The ship had been abandoned for centuries, and now it was asking him, a man with no real training, to wield its power. He had no idea if he could handle it, but the alternative, failing and letting the ship fall into the hands of those who would misuse it, was something he couldn't bear to consider. He had to act. He had to trust that somehow, he could do what needed to be done. The AI provided him with a set of instructions for navigation. Riley activated the ship's thrusters, and the starship slowly began to move, lifting off the ground with a smoothness that belied its enormous size. Riley could feel the power of the engines surging beneath him, the ship responding to his commands as though it was a living, breathing entity. It was overwhelming, but at the same time, exhilarating. For a brief moment, Riley allowed himself to be caught up in the excitement of the moment. The ship was a marvel of technology, far beyond anything humanity had ever created. As it soared into space, Riley marveled at the view outside the cockpit. Stars glittered like diamonds, and distant nebulae stretched across the vast expanse of the galaxy. It was breathtaking. He had always dreamed of seeing the stars, but now, he was in the heart of them, piloting the most advanced ship in the galaxy. But the beauty of the moment was short-lived. As the ship continued its ascent, Riley's mind began to race again. What was he supposed to do next? He had no idea how to control the ship's full capabilities, and the more he learned, the more unsettling it became. The AI kept feeding him more information, more details about the ship's purpose and the incredible power it contained. But Riley could barely keep up. Then, there was a sharp beeping sound. The ship's internal systems displayed a warning. Unknown fleet detected. Riley's heart skipped a beat. The alien factions, the ZYNTH, the Trollin, and the Arizi, had been watching the ship closely, and it was only a matter of time before they came to claim it for themselves. Riley hadn't expected them to act so quickly. But now, the presence of an unknown fleet sent a surge of panic through his veins. The ZYNTH were the most likely to act first. They had been the most vocal about the ship's potential as a weapon, and if they learned that Riley had taken control, they wouldn't hesitate to seize it. The AI's voice returned, calm and collected. "The fleet is closing in. They are preparing to engage." Riley cursed under his breath. He had no experience with combat. How could he fight off an entire fleet with no training? The alien factions had been vying for control of the ship, and now they were going to try to take it from him by force. It wasn't just a matter of piloting the ship anymore, it was about survival. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," the AI instructed. Riley's fingers flew across the control panel, doing his best to follow the AI's guidance. The ship responded instantly, its massive thrusters firing as it veered sharply to the side. Riley's heart pounded in his chest as the ship twisted and turned in space, dodging incoming fire from the fleet. The alien ships were relentless, their weapons lashing out with precision and force. Riley's hands shook as he tried to stay ahead of the attacks, but it was becoming clear that he wasn't going to be able to outrun them forever. "You must fight back," the AI said, its voice insistent. "Activate the weapons systems." Riley hesitated. He didn't want to destroy anyone. He didn't want to use the ship's weapons. But the AI was right, he couldn't keep running forever. He had to make a choice. With a deep breath, Riley activated the weapons systems. The ship's turrets spun into place, and a barrage of energy beams erupted from the starship's hull, striking the enemy fleet. Riley's hands were shaking as he fired again and again, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was crossing a line. Each shot, each explosion, felt like a step towards something he wasn't sure he could control. The fleet retaliated, and the space around him erupted into chaos. But Riley, guided by the AI's cold, calculated guidance, kept his focus. He couldn't afford to falter now. Riley's heart raced as the ship's weapons system fired again, the sharp bursts of energy cutting through space, obliterating enemy ships one after another. The alien fleet retaliated in full force, their advanced weaponry sending torrents of fire towards him. Riley's hands gripped the controls tightly, his breath shallow, as the ship twisted and turned, narrowly evading the incoming projectiles. The AI's voice continued its relentless guidance, the calm and detached tone offering little comfort in the midst of the chaos. "Maintain your course," the AI instructed, "and initiate evasive maneuver Delta 7. Riley's fingers flew over the control panel, his mind struggling to process the commands as quickly as they were given. Each movement felt like it took everything he had, but the ship responded effortlessly, as if it were an extension of himself. It was both exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. He had never been in combat before, had never even piloted a ship of this magnitude, yet now he was the sole defender of the Starship, the only one who could stop the onslaught. The distant explosions reverberated through the hull of the ship, the shock waves rippling in the surrounding vacuum of space. Riley's pulse was pounding in his ears, the pressure to perform mounting with every passing second. He had no training for this. His experience had been limited to janitorial work, cleaning the research vessel's corridors, maintaining the station's minor systems, and staying out of the way. But now, the fate of the Starship and its immense power rested in his hands. The AI's voice cut through his thoughts again, its calm detachment only highlighting the stakes of the situation. "The enemy fleet is deploying a secondary offensive. You must neutralize their command ship before they can coordinate another attack." Riley glanced at the readouts, the screen flashing warnings of incoming missile locks. The enemy fleet had split into two factions, one continuing the assault, while the other moved to flank him. He could feel the weight of his decisions bearing down on him, each moment more critical than the last. If he failed, it wouldn't just mean his death, it would mean the destruction of everything he had come to fear and dread about the ship's true power. "Target the lead ship and fire at will," the AI urged. Riley's hand hesitated over the weapon's controls. His mind raced. He had just started to pilot this massive warship, and now, the fate of an entire battle was in his hands. The choice was stark: destroy or be destroyed. The ship's weapons system was already primed, ready to unleash destruction at his command. Riley had never asked for any of this. He had never wanted to be a hero, let alone the last line of defense for a weapon that could wipe out entire worlds. But he had to act. His hands moved, trembling, and his thumb pressed down on the trigger. The ship's weapons unleashed with a deafening roar. Streams of energy shot out, crashing into the lead command ship of the alien fleet. The impact was immediate. Massive explosions erupted from the hull, the ship breaking apart as if it were made of paper. Riley could feel the force of the blasts through the ship, and for a brief moment, there was silence. Then, the alarms went off again, signaling that more ships were closing in. Riley gritted his teeth, taking a deep breath, trying to focus on the task at hand. You have disabled the lead ship, the AI confirmed. However, their secondary fleet remains active. You must continue the assault. Riley's mind raced as he looked at the tactical readouts. The remaining enemy ships were forming up, preparing for another strike. He knew he couldn't keep up this pace forever. His pulse was racing, his hands slick with sweat. The ship was far more advanced than anything humanity had ever created, but it was also far more dangerous. Every decision Riley made carried the weight of 1,000 lives, and if he made the wrong choice, the consequences would be catastrophic. But there was something else, something that gnawed at the back of his mind. The AI's voice, though efficient, was distant. There was no emotion, no empathy. It was just a machine, offering logical solutions to every problem. Yet Riley couldn't shake the feeling that the ship was more than just a vessel. It was alive, in a way. It had a purpose, a mission, and it had chosen him. But why? What was its true purpose? Riley's thoughts were interrupted by another burst of fire, followed by a sharp warning from the AI. Enemy ships incoming. Prepare for evasive action. Riley snapped his attention back to the controls. He didn't have time to dwell on his suspicions. He couldn't afford to. The alien fleet was relentless, and with every attack, he could feel the ship pushing its limits. He maneuvered the Starship, guiding it through a series of twists and turns, narrowly avoiding the enemy's weapons fire. But even as he evaded one attack, he knew there would be more. The ship's sensors were picking up more incoming fire, and Riley had to act quickly if he was going to survive. Then, something unexpected happened. The AI, which had been guiding him through every move, suddenly went silent. Riley glanced at the screen, but there was no readout from the ship's systems. No new commands. No alerts. The ship's energy levels dropped suddenly, and for a split second, Riley thought he had lost control. Panic surged through him, his mind racing. AI, what's happening? Riley called out, his voice shaky. There was no response. Riley frantically tapped the control panel, trying to bring the ship's systems back online. He could hear the sound of enemy fire growing louder as their ships closed in. The seconds felt like hours as Riley struggled to regain control. He felt utterly alone, cut off from the only thing that had been guiding him through this nightmare. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the AI's voice returned, its tone cooler than before. The Starship systems are temporarily disabled. You must make a choice, pilot. Riley's breath caught in his throat. The AI's words sent a chill through him. He didn't know what to do. The situation was slipping out of his control, and every second mattered. The enemy ships were nearly upon him. They were moments away from launching their final strike. Riley had no more time to waste. What choice? Riley asked, panic creeping into his voice. The ship was designed to be a weapon, not a protector, the AI explained. If you wish to prevent further destruction, you must disable the weapon systems. Alternatively, you may choose to engage the enemy, but know that the consequences of such an action will be irreversible. Riley's heart thudded in his chest as he weighed the options. To disengage the ship's weapons would mean giving up his only means of survival, but using the weapon meant committing to a path of destruction. The AI's words echoed in his mind. If he activated the ship's full power, it would obliterate the enemy. But what about the cost? What about the cost to him, to humanity, to the galaxy? He had no answers. The ship had given him no clear way forward, no guarantee of success. But in the silence that followed, Riley made his decision. He had come this far, and he wasn't about to back down now. With a steady hand, Riley engaged the weapons systems again. The ship's engines surged to life, and the weapons systems hummed with power. This time, however, he didn't aim to destroy. Instead, he fired carefully, strategically, targeting only the enemy ships that were in immediate range. He couldn't afford to let the situation spiral out of control. Riley didn't know if his actions would be enough, but for the first time, he was making his own choice. It was a choice he hoped he wouldn't regret. The battle raged on around him, but Riley had found a momentary clarity. Whatever happened next, he would face it on his own terms. And for the first time since he had stepped into the cockpit, Riley felt like he had some semblance of control. Riley's hands shook as he continued to pilot the Starship, guiding it through the chaos of the battle. The energy in the cockpit was palpable, the ship vibrating with each burst of weapons fire and evasive maneuver. He had made his choice. The power to destroy was within his grasp, yet he was holding back, deliberately limiting his strikes to only what was necessary. He could sense the weight of his decision, the tension between destruction and restraint. It wasn't just the lives of the aliens on the opposing fleet that hung in the balance. It was the future of humanity's relationship with the galaxy. The potential for peace or utter annihilation was his to command. The ship's AI had grown eerily silent again. Riley had expected guidance, but instead, he was left with the stillness of space and the sound of his own breath. The AI, for all its computational genius, had presented him with no answers to the deeper questions gnawing at him. Why had humanity been chosen to wield the ship's ultimate power? What did the ancient creators of this weapon want from him? And was he even the right person to decide the fate of so many? The ship's targeting systems hummed again, focusing on the remaining fleet. The enemy ships had regrouped, but they were still no match for the Starship's firepower. Riley could feel the controls slipping back into his hands, his confidence growing, albeit with every action accompanied by the haunting reminder of the ship's true purpose. It had been designed for one thing, to be the ultimate weapon of destruction. And now, here he was, the human pilot, the key to its unleashing. But the galaxy was not ready for the devastation it could bring. He was not ready for that. As another round of missiles came at him, Riley instinctively activated the shields, watching as the enemy's assault bounced harmlessly off the energy barrier. The ship's AI, which had once been a cold, calculating voice, now seemed to be growing more insistent, more commanding. "Pilot, you are hesitating," the AI said, its tone colder than before. "You must choose. The ship will not wait indefinitely." Riley's mind whirled. What was the AI trying to provoke? Did it want him to unleash the full power of the Starship? Was it playing some kind of game with him, testing him, pushing him to the limit? He had always been an observer, a passive player in the world around him, and yet now, the universe had thrust him into this role. There was no going back. His choices would ripple through the galaxy in ways he could not foresee. The enemy was regrouping again, preparing for their final assault. Riley's thoughts were consumed by a swirling mix of fear, doubt, and determination. What kind of leader would he be? Would he be the one to condemn countless innocent lives to destruction, or could he find another way, an unspoken path to salvation, even in the face of war? The AI interrupted his thoughts once more. "Target lock detected. The enemy is deploying a counterstrike. Your inaction will result in catastrophic consequences." The urgency in the AI's voice snapped Riley from his inner turmoil. He couldn't afford to waste any more time. The Starship's sensors lit up with an incoming barrage of fire, their missiles streaking through space at breakneck speeds. Riley's pulse quickened as the countdown began. It was too much for him to handle, too overwhelming. He didn't know what to do. A small part of him wanted to shut the system down completely, to escape, but there was no escape. There was only forward. Then, in the midst of the crisis, the unexpected happened. A burst of light flared on the ship's external sensors, a transmission from an unknown source. It came through the ship's secure channels, bypassing all of the usual defenses. The signal wasn't hostile, though the sheer force of it nearly overloaded the system. Riley's eyes widened as the transmission's data slowly unfolded on the console screen. The message was brief, cryptic. "We know what you found. We'll help you, but you must stop using the weapon." Riley's brow furrowed as he processed the message. It was a plea for peace, but who was sending it? He had no idea who was behind this transmission. The message seemed to come from another faction, one not aligned with any of the alien races currently at war with him. And yet, the words hung in the air, their implications striking him deeply. Riley's first instinct was to disregard it. It didn't make sense. The timing was off. Who could possibly know the ship's true capabilities? How could anyone have found him at this moment of crisis, in the heart of a battle? But the transmission lingered. The message was a lifeline, offering something he hadn't considered, an alternative. The AI, ever the pragmatist, had offered no such option, leaving him with one stark choice: destroy or be destroyed. But now, there was another path. A way to prevent further destruction, a chance to avoid the fate the Starship had been created for. As the enemy's fleet closed in once more, Riley's mind raced. Should he risk following the mysterious transmission? Should he engage with these unknown entities, who seemed to understand the gravity of the ship's power more than the factions around him? There were so many unknowns, so many risks. But for the first time, Riley felt something shift within him, a realization that he had control, that his choices didn't have to be dictated by the fear and pressure surrounding him. The AI, sensing his hesitation, interjected again. "Pilot, you cannot afford to wait. The fleet will reach you in seconds. You must choose." Riley swallowed hard. He wasn't sure how much time he had left, but it was running out. The alien ships were nearly upon him, their weapons locked and ready to strike. He couldn't keep stalling. And yet the message, that brief, enigmatic plea, kept reverberating in his mind. They wanted him to stop using the weapon. It was a choice between two paths. One path would lead to total annihilation, an end to the enemy fleet, yes, but also an escalation that could lead to more destruction down the line. The other path, the one hinted at by the mysterious message, offered a glimmer of hope. Peace was possible. He didn't have to become the monster the ship was designed to create. He could still find another way. Riley's fingers hovered over the control panel, his mind in turmoil. The Starship's immense power lay at his fingertips, but he had to choose whether to unleash it or reject it. A surge of clarity washed over him. He couldn't become a tool of destruction. He couldn't allow this weapon, this doomsday device, to define humanity's future. They were capable of more than that. With a steady breath, Riley made his decision. He disengaged the weapons systems. The ship's response was immediate, almost as if it had been waiting for this moment. The massive cannons retracted, the targeting systems deactivated, and the ship's engines slowed, as though letting the tension in the air dissipate. The immediate threat from the enemy fleet faded as their weapons locked onto nothing but empty space. Riley's hands were still trembling, his mind racing, but in that moment, he knew it was the right decision. The ship had power, yes, but humanity's strength didn't lie in their ability to destroy. It lay in their ability to build, to create, to unite. The galaxy had been on the brink of war, but Riley had made the first step toward peace. The transmission from the unknown source flickered again, its signal now clearer. The voice, calm and reassuring, spoke directly into his mind. "Thank you," it said. "You have chosen wisely. The galaxy will see what you've done." The enemy fleet, now without guidance or purpose, drifted away, their ships retreating into the distance. The battle was over, but Riley knew this was just the beginning. He had made his mark, and in doing so, had given the galaxy a chance at unity, a chance to rebuild, to heal. The ship's AI, once cold and distant, seemed to soften. "Pilot," it said, "you have reprogrammed the ship's core directive. It is no longer a weapon. It is a vessel of peace." Riley smiled, his heart light for the first time in what felt like forever. The ship, the galaxy, everything had changed. But now there was hope.